Out hypocrisy openly. He refused to give sermons behind altars. He stood among the pews. When he was ordained, he made only one promise to his bishop. If I ever lie from the pulpit, I'll leave the priesthood. It wasn't bravado, he meant it. And over the years, that vow would earn him both loyalty and enemies. Some who were there said he seemed older than he looked. Others said his eyes, usually sharp and bright, held a fear they didn't recognize. It was like he knew something, like something had already happened. That's when the stories started. Private staff claimed they had seen him staring out chapel windows for hours. He reportedly fasted for days, refused to sleep. One cardinal, speaking off record, said that in their first private meeting, Leo XIV asked only one question: "Do you believe God still speaks out loud?" It wasn't a joke, it was a test. And when the cardinal didn't answer quickly enough, the Pope simply nodded and said, "Then you're not ready for what's coming." He wasn't like the others. He didn't care about optics. He broke protocols daily, senators to sit in on theological debates. He ignored entire chains of bureaucracy. He refused to move into the apostolic palace, instead converting a guest wing into a communal housing unit for single mothers. His papacy didn't begin with pageantry. It began with fire. And as weeks passed, those closest to him noticed something deeper. His spiritual life.
Have you seen the orbs? Look on TikTok. Look at all the orbs in and around Vatican. You know what that is, don't you? I poured out my spirit on Babylon, as I promised I would. And the time to do it was when Pope Leo came, my old friend Pope Leo. And what those orbs are is evidence that it's orbs being photographed or filmed inside Vatican when, during and after Pope Leo. So that's the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit has been poured out on Babylon. And I'm waiting to hear from them.
Wasn't just intent.
Everywhere, what's that about?
Pope follows a thin one's papacy, and I think that's what many people
Y'all see these?
if not
They're
anxious
orbs.
to determine today. Are these cardinals going to
What the
select
heck?
continuity on him? They're all over.
Is it really? Right. That's so strange.
They're all over. I just caught one on video.
And do not let Shannon have
Things he shouldn't. He anticipated opposition before it formed. He quoted verses no one remembered reading. He walked with the silence of a man, constantly listening for something or someone. One bishop said, "It's like he's always mid-conversation, but with someone we can't hear." So when Pope Leo XIV finally announced, without warning, that Jesus Christ himself had appeared to him and delivered a message that would change everything, most people were stunned.
Remember what my motive is for, or my motto for the second coming: everything's changing.
But not everyone. A few had seen it coming. The vision hadn't just arrived, it had been building, brewing inside him since the moment the smoke turned white. And deep down, some had already suspected the truth. He wasn't just elected, he was chosen. The silence in the chapel was so complete it felt alive. Not peaceful, heavy. The kind of silence that makes the breath in your lungs feel intrusive. Pope Leo XIV had come here many nights before, to pray, to plead, to sit in the stillness with the weight of his calling, pressing harder every day. But this night was different. He didn't come with words. He didn't come to speak at all. He came because he felt it before he saw it. Something was coming. Not a thought, not a feeling, a certainty, like gravity.
Yep.
He knelt and closed his eyes.
No.
Not in ritual, in surrender. Then it began. There was no thunder, no flash, just the world folding in on itself. The air dropped in temperature. His spine stiffened. His eyes opened. And there he was, Christ, not as a figure of comfort, not as the merciful teacher walking among olive trees. No, this was the Christ of Revelation, the one with fire in his eyes, the one whose presence alone reveals truth in its rawest form. His robe was white, but not soft. It radiated purity so intense it felt unbearable. His face, Pope Leo could barely look at it, and yet he couldn't turn away. His eyes, those eyes, did not burn with anger. They burned with pain. Jesus said nothing at first. He simply looked at him, through him. Every breath Pope Leo took felt like a confession. Every beat of his heart echoed like judgment. He felt smaller than he had ever felt in his life. Not out of shame,
I reversed type 2 and stopped using insulin with a simple 7-second trick.
but out of recognition. Here was the Creator, standing before the created. Not in metaphor, not in symbol, in reality. Then Christ spoke. Rome has forgotten me. The words hit like a tremor beneath the soul. Jesus did not shout. His voice didn't rise, but every syllable came with weight, measured, final. They have made my house a fortress, he continued, but locked me outside its gates. Pope Leo couldn't move. He couldn't respond. The words entered him like arrows, exposing every hidden corner of fear.
Open up. Let me go and see you. I'll go to you. I want to. I've said from the start. I want to be shown around Vatican City. It's you know, very interesting and beautiful.
Every comfort he had taken in tradition, every excuse he'd once thought was enough. Jesus stepped closer, not with wrath, but with sorrow so deep it felt older than time. I came in mercy. I sent my mother with warnings. I gave signs. I gave time. His tone didn't change, but the air around him began to. The room felt stretched, like space itself was cracking. Christ's face was calm, but it held the grief of nations. Now, that time is ending. Then came the message. He didn't say it all at once. It came in waves, each one heavier than the last. He spoke of betrayals hidden in the walls of the Vatican. Not mistakes, not misunderstandings, betrayals. He named no names, but the accusations needed none. There are those, he said, who wear my cross, but mock my name. They sit in marble halls, but deny the cries of the innocent. They pray in Latin tongues, but spit out justice in secret chambers. Leo listened, barely breathing. He felt the words shape themselves inside him, too large to carry, too sacred to change. Jesus spoke of the children, the voices buried, the innocents sold for silence. You shielded the shepherds, he said, and let the lambs be slaughtered. At those words,
Okay, so I'm talking about there, covering up child abuse. Obviously, you know that's more a big theme. The second coming, I brought it up quite a few times with Justin Welby, and again, you know, when I first talked about Pope Leo. So this is what I'm telling him now.
the Pope broke. Tears streamed down his face, not because he disagreed, but because he knew. He knew it was true. He had seen the reports. He had read the sealed documents. And though he had not committed these crimes himself, he was now their steward. Christ made it clear. Complicity by silence is complicity still. Then came...
Absolutely is. Absolutely is. And I hope, you know, other, for while it remains, other priests and bishops and cardinals and archbishops listen and accept Justin. Have you actually accepted this, Justin Welby? Okay, because these words are more, I'm saying them to Leo, but they're more related to you, aren't they?
the warnings. If the truth is not spoken, Rome will fall. Not symbolically, not spiritually, Physically, its stones will cry out, its rivers will flood, fire will sweep its domes. Christ.
Okay, there you go. You know, that's going to happen imminently, as you know, and that's why the message is delivered now to him, because obviously it's going to happen in, you know, not just within his papacy, but right at the very start of it, right now, which is why I'm giving him a vision right now at the start of his papacy. I mean, this is my chosen pope. It is. Absolutely. They're saying it in the comment section here. They know. And like I say, Pope Leo was the best pope. I mean, there's up for 400, more than 400 of them. You know, a few of them must have been all right, must have been okay. And like I say, he's my beloved friend, and I love him. And I know all the usual lots and bits will be on there going, oh, he's the Antichrist. No, the office of papacy is Antichrist, not the man. And, you know, obviously the office of papacy can turn the man into an Antichrist or an image of that office, if you like. But it's the office that we're worried about here. And Pope Leo's just gone into that office. And, you know, we'll see.
Wasn't making threats. He was declaring cause and effect. Judgment.
So I'm not looking at what his rituals are or what his beliefs are. We all know that, you know, the rituals of all organised religion are just meaningless externalisation of things that need to be internalised. What I'm doing here is I'm just looking at the man's heart. And like I say, you... I'm glad some of you people on BitChute, some of you alleged Christians aren't God, because no one had passed your test, would they? That you purists.
Begins in the sanctuary. My patience is not weakness. My silence is not absence. My mercy has a limit.
Exactly, and I've said that loads of times. My patience is not weakness. You know, I am long suffering. I'll wait and wait and wait, trying to get the best possible peaceful solution and knock some sense into people. But you know, there will come a reckoning. That, like I say at the end here, my mercy is not limitless. You know, there is an end point, and we are there at that end point. The only losers will be you. I'll just start all over again. Yeah, I'll be sipping pina colada in Club Tropicana 8,000 years from now. Put my feet up. Thinking this was all a bad dream, literally instantly, because we're outside time and space, okay?
Each sentence rang like a bell in the bones. It wasn't fury, it was heartbreak turned into fire. Jesus spoke then of the saints, of those who died in secret, of those who were silenced by shame, of whistleblowers buried by bureaucracy, of women whose visions were dismissed, of priests cast out for telling the truth, of
women whose visions are dismissed. See, why would I give women visions? Well, because why did I make women, for example, my first witnesses last time? Because the tradition was that a woman as a witness was, you know, less than a man. So to make the point that I completely disagreed with that, I appeared just to women as my main witnesses to start with. I'm saying here they're doing the same thing again. So the theme obviously is, you know, misogyny. Why would I say women's visions? I've given visions to women that have been ignored by you lots because they're women, because you're misogynists. That's what I'm saying.
prophets mocked as madmen. The blood of the faithful cries from the ground, he said, and it reaches my throne. Pope Leo trembled. The room began to feel as...
Now, if I said this to the last Pope, he'd have got offended and wanted to punch me on the nose. If anyone offends my mother, I punch them on the nose, yeah? It was just it was not possible to get through to the old man. And like I say, Pope Leo's different, so let's just see what happens.
if it were caving in, not physically, but spiritually. The weight of divine sorrow was suffocating. Then Christ gave his command. You must open the vaults. That was the phrase. Not poetic, not vague, exact. Reveal what was hidden. Speak what was sealed. Do not delay, do not distort. He said the people had a right to the truth, not just the believers, but the whole world, because the judgment to come would not be selective. This is not for the church alone, he said. It is for the nations who turned a blind eye. It is for those who worshipped the institution and ignored the cross. Jesus made it clear.
Okay, so what were they doing in my vision in 1982? They were all worshipping the institution. That's what I mean, the life of the church. That's what the previous pope exalted high above his head, and then tried to kill Jesus. Yeah. So, like I say, the cardinals or bishops or whoever they were who amassed beforehand and sort of were in discussion after the little priest told them that I was here. And dragged his feet. Remember my vision? Whatever they said to the Pope caused this murderous overreaction from the office of papacy, the last Pope that I'm talking about now. And it was all, my vision was all about the fact that they were, like I say, like I've said here, they're worshipping the institution. And that's not that's not your God. That's not religion. That's not sincere. That's not being a truther. The truth is, get back to your first love.
This was the final warning. The church had been given every chance, every grace, but the hour was near. When I return, will I find faith? He asked. Not rhetorically. He asked Leo directly, face to face. And the silence that followed was more terrifying than any rebuke. Christ didn't wait for an answer, because he already knew it. Then came his last words. He looked down at Pope Leo XIV, still on his knees, weeping, shaking, and with a voice that blended thunder and tenderness, he spoke, "The blood of saints will not go unheard." Then he was gone. The vision changed everything.
Okay, so that's that. Like I said right from the start, their blood is always before me, and I'm not acting. This is not just Russ, acting. Who's going to pour out the wrath of Russ? Like I say, I feel the weight of history and of the blood of the saints and the blood of the saints of my martyrs, and those who died for the truth, truthers who died for the truth, like I potentially did if I didn't have angels, I would have. And that's what we do. Okay, we're all the same. We're all like me. That's the angels and the martyrs and these people. You've got to be brave. I'm saying this to people now out there who have got a platform and they could help me and promote this message. You've got to be brave in life, otherwise you just shrivel up and die, because you're not really what I have in mind for a human. Humans are brave and courageous creatures. I stuck my head above the parapet. You've got to follow my example. You've got to follow my example. You've got to be a truther, and when you hear the truth and you believe it's the truth, and you've got to have zeal and to want to mirror these videos and mirror my videos and get the truth out. Help me, because the whole system's based on your friends lifting you up and the collective. If the collective fails, then there's a fault and I have to start again, so the collective doesn't fail. At the moment, the collective couldn't be failing anymore. Come on.
Not just for Pope Leo XIV, but for the Vatican itself. From the moment he delivered his cryptic, urgent message to the world, Jesus has spoken to me, and we must obey or face ruin. A wave of unease swept through the marble halls and gilded chambers of the Holy See.
Okay, Leo told the truth. He's a truther. That's why he's back. And what he just said then is, couldn't make it any clearer. I've been saying the same thing. I have. I'm saying it now. You obey or you face ruin. There is only, I've always said, it either happens violently or it happens peacefully. And, but it happens. It's one of those two options you've got. I haven't wrote a script where Babylon wins. Sorry. It's my prerogative. I'm God. Okay, so what are we doing? Because my angels already know how it ends, but they put a veil of forgetfulness over me. So I'm always sincerely fighting for the best possible peaceful outcome. I'm still doing that now, but we are really, I mean, we really are. You know we are at the end.
The old guard didn't show their panic in public, but it spread like wildfire behind the stone walls. These were men trained in diplomacy, secrecy, and survival. They didn't shout, they whispered. And the whispers turned into meetings. And the meetings turned into something far darker.
Yeah.
Cardinals who had smiled at his election now avoid.
Stop them, Leo. Stop them having meetings. Okay, stop them, because they just try and outdo each other on, you know, who's most loyal to the life of the church, the institution. I've just warned you that they're worshipping the institution, and you know, but all these meetings, what are they doing? They're trying to outdo each other. That's what I saw in my vision. They were trying to outdo each other for, you know, who's the most. Probably because they're just thinking of their careers, and they're trying to virtue signal to their, you know, colleagues how loyal they are to the mafia. Okay, fine. You remember your first love. That's me. And what it's all about. It's not about the institution. Stop them having meetings, because that's all they're going to do in those meetings. It's just going to make it worse, and you're going to end up being killed after 33 days or something, Leo. Okay, take control. Take control. And, you know, be ruthless. I mean, you know, like I say, it's all about the context. Is this worship of the institution? So do what you have to do to put things in context.
In his gaze, bishops who once praised his humble spirit and devotion to the people suddenly claimed he was unstable. The tone changed overnight. He's overwhelmed, some said. He's seeing things. But they...
Yeah, it's a second coming, you idiots. That's why he's overwhelmed and he's seeing things. It's a second coming. What? This is it. No other pope's going to get... Okay, so what I'm telling you here is, Leo, you've got my angels protecting you. You've got the Holy Spirit. I'm pouring out the Holy Spirit on all of Babylon. Now you're there. And you're born again. And I'm here for you. I mean, literally, physically. If you want me there, I'll tell you what, right? What I want to do is, obviously, you know, I'll completely brief you, and explain to you theologically why the bishops need to understand everything's happened. You've got no choice. You literally have no choice. You've got to obey or face ruin. Well, that's just, you've really got to. It's been a long, long time now, and you've seen evidence after evidence of that. You know we're outside time and space. We know the future. That's it. You know you have to get on with me and work with me. And Pope Leo is my choice for the man to do that. And I'm hoping that together, and with a New Zealand to follow the will of God, he'll help me call on Protestant sects to follow suit. Even, I tell you what would be a good idea, if me and Pope Leo went round as a double act on TV, just both of us at the same time. So Jesus and the Pope. I mean, what a wonderful ending that would be to, you know, the Antichrist drama of Pope and you know. Wouldn't that be the perfect way to end it all? Me and Leo go around on TV as friends together, and we try and explain. I'm sure I can explain to Pope Leo why I need to do this, and why it's the best way forward for the human race. And like I say, we can come to all sorts of agreements, so people aren't you know, stuck. Yeah.
Weren't asking questions out of concern. They were laying the groundwork for something else, something coordinated. At first, it was quiet. Glances exchanged at banquets, silent nods in the corridors. But as Leo XIV doubled down, insisting the Vatican open its archives and reveal what had been kept from the faithful, those whispers hardened into strategy. Not everyone stood against him. A minority of reformers, younger cardinals, mostly from Latin America and parts of Africa, stood by him. They had long hoped for a pope who would finally tear down the veil of silence that had haunted the church for decades. They believed Leo was the first to truly confront the rot. But they were outnumbered, and their support made them targets too. Soon, reports began to surface. A leaked letter from Cardinal Rossetti, a staunch traditionalist and longtime Vatican insider, warned of increasing instability in the Holy Father's statements. He suggested temporary limitations on papal authority until clarity can be restored. The letter was never officially confirmed, but it circulated quickly, conveniently, among bishops and press alike. That leak was no accident. It was the first real shot in what was becoming a silent war. The Vatican has always been a place of masks, of smiles hiding suspicion, of protocol disguising power plays. But now the gloves were beginning to come off. Inside the Secretariat of State, the Vatican's diplomatic nerve center, clerics began collecting statements the Pope had made since his vision. His public sermons were being analyzed not for doctrine, but for weakness. One internal memo, never meant to leave the building, described Pope Leo's messages as apocalyptic rhetoric bordering on prophetic delusion. Someone wanted those words to be found, and they were. Meanwhile, in the Apostolic Palace, strange things began happening. A trusted aide of Pope Leo's was suddenly reassigned without warning. The Pope's private meetings were rescheduled by third parties. Documents he requested from the archives mysteriously disappeared, only to be returned with portions redacted. When he confronted the archivist, the man wouldn't meet his eyes. "I was instructed," he said quietly. He wouldn't say by whom. The reformers tried to push back. Cardinal Dominguez from Spain gave a defiant address in front of hundreds, urging the church to listen to the voice of conscience and heed the message from heaven. But within a week, accusations of financial mismanagement were levied against him. Sourced from an anonymous report, dated 2 years prior. Convenient timing. He was removed from several committees.
All those people smearing and running, psyops against the truth. We know who you are, and you're going to suffer imminently. I mean, this is judgment time. You get in my way now, and you're going to suffer big time right now. I mean, this is it. Yeah.
And his influence quickly waned. Others got the message. Speak up, and you'll be buried. But nothing compared to what happened next. A leaked audio recording surfaced on a fringe Catholic news site, purporting to be Pope Leo XIV in a private confessional, sobbing as he described his vision. The audio was grainy, poorly edited, and almost certainly fake. But that didn't matter. It spread like wildfire. Within hours, commentators were suggesting the Pope was mentally ill. Psychosis, one whispered on a late-night broadcast. Religious delusions, said another. The smear campaign had begun. The Pope's inner circle began to shrink. The few aides he trusted became harder to reach. Phone lines were monitored. His emails were filtered. Security concerns, they told him, but the real concern was control. Even as he continued to preach truth from the pulpit, the Vatican machinery was quiet.
I'll meet you, my friend, anytime, any place, anywhere. Just you and me, just in a car park or somewhere, in a pub, anywhere. Yeah. I haven't got a passport though, so you'll have to fly over here. But I'm here for you.
Turning against him. The same halls that once echoed with chants of "Viva il Papa" now carried only cautious footsteps and closed doors. Then came the threats, not direct, never direct, but unmistakable. A package left in the Pope's quarters. No return address. Inside, a burnt page from a Bible, and a note that simply read, "Some secrets keep the world standing." No fingerprints, no suspects. But a message, loud.
I tell you what, we're on to you, mate, okay? We know who you are. We know where you live. We're on to all of you. Back off.
And clear. Another night, his room was entered. Nothing was taken, but a crucifix on his desk had been turned upside down. Deliberate, intimate, meant to shake him, and it did. But Leo did not stop. He gave another...
Yeah, who's your God? You're turning the cross upside down for what, yeah? Because of what? Where you going? What you doing? You're a fucking loser, mate.
address. This time, he spoke plainly. There are forces inside these walls who would rather silence heaven than face the truth, he said. The crowd erupted.
Bingo.
But inside, fury burned. In secret, a group of cardinals met behind locked doors, away from cameras, away from scrutiny. Their goal was not dialogue, it was resolution. Whispers filled the air, and the plan began to take form. Secret meetings to remove the Pope. The Church has always spoken in light, but operated in shadows. Since the days of the Apostles, truth and secrecy have walked side by side through its corridors. But what happens when the light demands to shine on the darkness, and the darkness hides behind the very name of Christ? That is the question now facing the Vatican and the world in the wake of Pope Leo XIV's vision.
Absolutely. I hope the weight of these words and what's being revealed here, because obviously what's being revealed here is more than, you know, a man can know and summarise. This is the Holy Spirit telling you stuff here, telling you the truth of what's going on behind the scenes. So,
a vision not only of fire and judgment, but of betrayal. Not just of prophetic doom, but of rot, buried deep within the heart of the Church itself. When the Pope declared that Jesus Christ had appeared to him with a terrifying message, one that urgently called for the exposure of hidden truths, it wasn't just a spiritual revelation, it was a reckoning. Because the things buried inside Vatican walls were never just relics and old prophecies. They were transactions, decisions, silence. For decades, perhaps even centuries, the Church has kept more than just sacred doctrine behind closed doors. It has hidden failures, compromises, justifications too ugly to say out loud, and too dangerous to let into the light. The Vatican's long tradition of secrecy didn't start in malice. In the early days, it was about survival, protecting the faith from invading empires, from heresies, from political predators. But somewhere along the way, secrecy became the system. It was no longer about protecting the gospel.
right.
It was about protecting power, protecting legacy,
The institution.
and sometimes protecting sins. Pope Leo XIV understood this better than most, and it's why his vision of Christ shook him to his core. Because in it, Jesus didn't just point to the world's evil. He pointed inward, to the throne rooms, the sealed archives, the smiling men in robes who had sworn oaths not to truth, but to control.
Jesuits.
For generations,
Jesuits.
popes have used Christ's name as both shield and sword, preaching his mercy while using his authority to justify silence. Scandals were buried with the phrase, "for the good of the Church."
Yeah.
Financial misdeeds were reframed as prudent stewardship. Deals with governments, compromises with tyrants, arrangements with bankers, wrapped in the language of moral complexity, but made in boardrooms far removed from the gospel. The Vatican Bank, a fortress of financial mystery, has been accused for years of laundering money, protecting criminal assets, and hiding deals with morally dubious regimes.
Yeah, they work with the mafia.
In 1982, the collapse of Banco Ambrosiano and the suspicious death of its chairman were both tied to the Vatican's financial web.
And the Freemasons.
Investigations were launched and swiftly buried. For the unity of the Church, to protect the faithful in the spirit of obedience. But Pope Leo XIV's vision turned all of that upside down. Because in his vision, Christ wasn't smiling.
No.
He wasn't handing down comfort.
No.
He wasn't even asking. He was warning,
Yep.
condemning, accusing.
Yep.
And his words carried weight. You speak in my name, but you bury my truth.
Exactly.
The Pope described Jesus' voice as filled with pain. Not anger, but sorrow.
Yep.
A sorrow that came from betrayal.
Yep.
Not from the outside world, but from inside the sanctuary.
Mm.
You turned my house into a fortress, Jesus had said, and guarded your secrets more fiercely than your faith.
Yeah.
Pope Leo heard it, a direct accusation, not against one man or one generation, but against a structure that had made secrecy sacred and accountability optional. Inside the Vatican, there are those who have long feared such a moment, not because they don't believe in God, but because they've built their careers on avoiding questions. Cardinals who have seen corruption but looked away. Bishops who've rewritten uncomfortable history in the name of stability. Clergy who've worn their silence like armor. And now, with one vision, it's all under threat. Because Jesus didn't call for reform. He called for revelation. In recent years, internal Vatican memos have surfaced showing attempts to suppress investigations into abuse, financial misdeeds, and even links to foreign intelligence. Reports were redirected. Victims were paid. Whistleblowers were quietly exiled. Each time, Christ's name was stamped at the bottom like a closing prayer.
Okay, so remember, my priest was worst according to record damages paid, paedophile priest in Catholic Church history, and they moved him. That's all they did. He's escaped justice. They moved him. We think probably to somewhere like in North Africa, Africa or somewhere, but he's been moved, and like I say, above the law, they're not allowed to. It's just shocking, isn't it?
But now, that name has come back, not in whispers, but in warning. And for the first time, the faithful are beginning to ask, if Jesus appeared today, not in stained glass, but in flesh, what would he overturn first? It is no longer a fringe question. Pilgrims arriving in Rome now come not just to pray, but to ask. They ask why certain documents are sealed. They ask why Christ's name is used to defend wealth, while the poor line the steps of basilicas. They ask what truths have been locked away, and why the Pope is being threatened for opening them. There is a tension now, not just political, but spiritual. Because if the Church has hidden what Christ wanted revealed, then its greatest crisis is not external. It is internal. Jesus' message, according to Pope Leo, didn't single out atheists, or governments, or modern ideologies. It didn't point fingers at the world. It pointed straight at the stewards of his name.
Yep.
The wolves are not beyond the gates, the Pope had said, quoting the vision.
Yep.
They are in the pulpit, in the palace,
Yep.
in the council. This was not a symbolic warning, it was a declaration. Because Jesus warned not just about the world, but the wolves inside the Church. There are certain words from Jesus that echo across time, simple, sharp, and unmistakable. Woe to you, teachers of the law, you whitewashed tombs. Words that were never directed at atheists or rebels, but at religious leaders, hypocrites.
Yep.
Those who wrapped themselves in holiness while their hearts rotted beneath the surface. That message wasn't vague. It was pointed. It was dangerous. And it's the same message Pope Leo XIV says he heard in his vision. Only this time, it wasn't Galilean Pharisees being addressed. It was the Church. It was us. He didn't describe a gentle Christ offering comfort. He described a Christ who wept not for the world, but for his own betrayal.
Yeah.
Not by skeptics, but by the very people who claimed to be his representatives.
Yeah.
People who recited his words but twisted them, who preached humility while chasing power, who defended the structures he never built and ignored the teachings he spoke plainly. The betrayal wasn't just moral, It was architectural, foundational, because the modern church, in Christ's eyes, had become something he never intended, something unrecognizable from the Sermon on the Mount,
Yeah.
something built not on sand, but on silence. Pope Leo didn't flinch when he said it. He didn't veil the accusation in soft language. He quoted what he heard directly. "You preach in my name, but your hearts serve another king."
Yeah.
He stood beneath the golden dome of St. Peter's and let that line hang in the air. And for a moment, no one moved, no one blinked, because in those words, there was no confusion. This wasn't about minor reforms. It was a confrontation. Christ had returned not to comfort the church, but to hold it accountable.
Judgment.
And where does the betrayal begin? Not in scandal, not in secrecy, but in the slow, quiet abandonment of his voice. The voice from the mountaintop, saying, "Blessed are the poor. Love your enemies. Do not store up treasures on earth." These weren't optional values. They were commands. And yet look around. Look at the Vatican's marble halls, the guarded vaults, the political alignments, the investments. Look at the power structures, the titles, the legal defenses, the endless PR campaigns, the armored vehicles and golden rings. None of this reflects a man who walked barefoot and told his disciples to own nothing. That's what shook Pope Leo the most. In his vision, Christ didn't just speak. He showed. He lifted the veil. He made Leo see the contrast between the Jesus of the Gospels and the institution that now claimed his authority. And the gap was breathtaking. A man who washed the feet of outcasts now had successors with armored gates and private jets. A man who was crucified for challenging religious elites was now quoted by them to justify their privilege. It wasn't just hypocrisy. It was inversion.
Yeah.
Everything had been flipped.
That's right.
The papal throne, once a symbol of service, had become indistinguishable from worldly monarchy. Papal infallibility, a concept never once taught by Jesus, was now wielded like a shield against accountability.
Yeah.
Popes once lived and died in poverty or exile. Now they sat in rooms guarded by centuries of political insulation, all while quoting a man who told his followers to expect suffering, to choose the lowest seat at the table, and to live like sheep among wolves. Jesus' teachings weren't vague metaphors. They were clear lifestyle instructions. Love radically, forgive endlessly, speak truth without fear, give until it hurts, trust God, not gold, serve, don't rule. But somewhere along the centuries, those teachings were reframed as ideals instead of commands, noble suggestions instead of mandates. And in that shift, the betrayal took root. The gospel became a brand. The church became a fortress. And Christ's words, once explosive, became tame. In Pope Leo's vision, he said Jesus showed him the church as it once was, a gathering of the poor, the sick, the unwanted, people who had nothing but believed they had everything because they had Christ. And then he showed him what it had become, a structure so focused on preservation that it had forgotten purpose. Men who studied theology their entire lives, but never once laid hands on the feet of a leper. Clergy who debated doctrine in marble chambers while children starved within walking distance, all while repeating his name. "You wear my name," he said, "but deny my truth." It wasn't a rebuke of doctrine. It wasn't about tradition. It was about heart. The kind of heart that Jesus said he desired more than sacrifice. The kind of faith that doesn't just speak, but bleeds. The kind of love that costs something. And Leo understood, in that moment, that much of what the church now calls strength is actually fear. Fear of losing status. Fear of being seen as vulnerable. Fear of confrontation with truth. And in that fear, It has traded its cross for comfort, its voice for silence. That's the betrayal. That's what Christ revealed. Not a church that denied his divinity, but a church that denied his example. A church that spoke of miracles, but ignored the wounded. That quoted the crucifixion, but avoided discomfort. That bowed to kings, but ignored the kingdom. Pope Leo said that as the vision faded, he was left with one final sentence, spoken so clearly it felt etched into his chest. You wear my name, but deny my truth. And that sentence has not stopped echoing since. It happened again, not in grandeur, not in thunder, not beneath stained glass, or in the roar of applause. It happened in the stillness. Alone in prayer, Pope Leo XIII found himself once more enveloped in something beyond the senses. What he later called a presence so gentle, yet so crushing in its sorrow, it was almost unbearable to remain standing. He fell to his knees without thought. He said it was like being in the eye of a storm, where silence didn't calm, but exposed. And this time, it wasn't Jesus who appeared. It was his mother. The Virgin Mary, as she had once done to 3 children in the hills of Portugal, came again, but not in peace, not in celebration. She arrived as a mother does when her warnings have been ignored. There was no speech prepared, no rehearsed greeting. Pope Leo said he barely dared to look up. The sadness in the air felt physical. It clung to the room like fog. And when he did raise his eyes, he saw what he could only describe as grief made flesh. Mary didn't shine the way icons often depict her. She didn't hover above the ground, nor wear a crown. She looked like a woman who had been watching her children destroy each other for centuries and had finally come to say the quiet part aloud. She did not contradict her son's message. She didn't add to it. She didn't soften it. She confirmed it. Every word, every accusation, every warning. She stood silently at first, just long enough for Pope Leo to feel the unbearable weight of being seen. Seen not as a pope, but as a man carrying a church carrying its secrets, and secrets that, in turn, carried judgment. She said very little, according to Leo. What she did say, she said with calm precision. Her voice was maternal, but firm. He warned you, she said, and you must warn them. He waited for comfort. It never came. Instead, she began to recount what he already knew, but refused to believe fully until now. She spoke of the warnings she had delivered at Fatima, that unless the church repented and revealed what heaven had shown, Rome would face consequences beyond comprehension. She spoke of the secrecy, the manipulation, the excuses. She reminded him that this was never about one secret or one prophecy. It was about rot and the refusal to acknowledge it. She spoke of priests who had turned their collars into shields, of bishops who had hidden behind tradition instead of truth. She said plainly, "You speak of me to protect your silence, not to honor my son," because the church, she said, had built a fortress not of stone, but of fear. Fear of shame, fear of scandal, fear of losing control. And in that fear, they had made the same mistake the Pharisees made long ago. They traded obedience for appearance. She reminded Leo of something Jesus had said in his first vision. Mary echoed it, adding, "They defend me while ignoring him." That's what stung most. The painful irony that devotion to Mary had become, in some corners, a distraction from the very gospel her son died to deliver. She said she had not come to give a new prophecy, but to repeat the one already given, and to confirm that time was short, not apocalyptically, not with fire and brimstone, but spiritually. The soul of the church was sick, and the illness was pride. She said heaven had waited long enough. that mercy had already spoken, that silence would now speak only judgment. That's when Leo noticed something. She hadn't moved, not once. Her eyes never blinked, but there were tears, not falling, not streaming, but held, as if even her sorrow had grown weary. And then she said the line that froze the blood in his veins. A single sentence, spoken without anger or volume, but with such depth that it shattered any remaining hope that this was simply a vision meant to inspire. He came to judge the shepherds first. It was never about the outside world, not the governments, not the media, not even the skeptics. The wrath Jesus had spoken of wasn't aimed at the enemies of the church. It was for those inside it, the ones who claimed to speak for him, the ones who stood behind pulpits and altars, who wore robes and rings, who blessed and bowed and pronounced in his name, but who had ignored his commands, distorted his message, and buried their failures under incense and ritual. Pope Leo said he felt every failure pressing into him then, not just of others, but of himself, every compromise, every silence, every time he had chosen diplomacy over confrontation. Mary didn't condemn him, but she didn't comfort him either. She stood as witness, as mother, as prophet, and as mirror. Her role wasn't to offer escape. It was to make sure he understood. Jesus had spoken. The church was on trial, and he had been chosen not to preserve it, but to test it, to tell the truth, even if it tore the entire structure down. She made no promises, no guarantees. She did not say the church would survive. She only said that if it were to be saved.
So I'm accommodating the Catholic belief system in Mary. I mean, obviously the reason to do that, obviously this is a Mary that's come without a crown. So they're being told, this is my mother, my beloved mother, and, you know, she's wonderful, and you should listen to her, but she's not me. Honor Mary, of course, my mother, my beloved mother, and listen to what she's saying.
It would be through truth, and that truth would not be welcomed. She warned him that he would be opposed, hated, and betrayed, not by enemies, but by brothers. And then she wept, not loudly, not theatrically, just one breath, one tremble. And Pope Leo swore he could feel the air grow colder. She didn't cry for the world. She didn't cry for the lost. She didn't cry for Rome. She wept, not for the world, but for the church. By the third week after his second vision, Rome no longer felt like Rome. It wasn't just the politics or the unease inside the Vatican. Something in the air had shifted. The calm that had once covered the city like tradition now felt brittle, ready to snap. Crowds were forming outside St. Peter's every morning. Some came with candles, some came with protest signs, and some came with fear in their eyes, whispering words like judgment, prophecy, wrath. Inside the Holy See, the atmosphere was worse. Rooms once filled with calm ritual were now flooded with whispers, arguments behind shut doors, and looks that lasted too long. Something was coming, and they all felt it. No one expected things to escalate this quickly, but they did, and not in the way anyone planned. The first signs were small, power flickers, sudden storms, thunder rolling across cloudless skies. Then came the real events, what the news called coincidences. A sudden sinkhole opened not far from the Vatican walls, swallowing an entire section of street. Days later, lightning struck the top of St. John Lateran, the oldest church in Rome, the one known as the seat of the Pope himself. People gasped. Tourists took photos, but the faithful stood in silence. Was it just weather, or was heaven making a point? Social unrest began to build just as fast. Inside Italy, Anti-Vatican protests surged, not from atheists or activists, but from practicing Catholics. Many believed Pope Leo's visions. Others believed he had gone mad. But both sides agreed on one thing: something was deeply wrong. Meanwhile, wildfires in southern Europe, freak floods in Spain, and a sudden heat wave that scorched the hills outside Rome added fuel to the tension. News anchors avoided the word judgment, but you could hear it in their tone. The fear was spreading, and it wasn't just coming from prophecy, it was coming from reality. The Vatican's attempts to calm the situation failed. Every press release sounded colder than the last. Every attempt to silence the Pope only made him louder. Inside the Vatican, Pope Leo remained calm, but resolute. He had stopped taking private meetings with certain cardinals. He had cancelled ceremonial appearances. Instead, he spent more time in silent chapels, more time with scripture, and according to his closest advisors, more time weeping, not out of fear, but out of burden. He had seen what the others hadn't. He had heard what they refused to acknowledge. And now the signs were confirming it. He went public again, this time without hesitation. The voice that once trembled.
I've told him everything. This is it. I mean, he knows now. I'm waiting for someone to reach out on my email. I'm not going to publicise it or embarrass you or anything. Things are much bigger than that. Much more crucial and life and death situation for the world here. So reach out to me remain anonymous at first. We can sort things out and work out where we go from here. Okay, you're the Mother Church, and I'm coming to you for judgment first. So I'm coming in peace. Hopefully, that's why Leo's there now, and why all this is happening now, because this is it. I mean, even Mary's come up and said the time is short. My mum. Okay, this is it. Time is short.
Now echoed. Standing before a roaring crowd in the square, he said it plainly. Jesus said judgment begins with the house of God, and we are that house. No one clapped, no one cheered. The air felt like stone. He wasn't offering comfort. He wasn't offering escape. He was announcing accountability. And that scared more people than any prophecy ever could. He warned of further signs. He warned that resistance would only harden the coming blow.
Yeah.
And then he paused. But for mercy, he said if the church refused to confess its sins, if it refused to humble itself, then it could not ask the world to do the same. What shepherd, he asked.
I'm asking you, and I'm asking the Jesuits, listen to this. Crucify your ego. Humble yourselves. The second coming is underway. We're right at the end of it. Okay, turn this into something beautiful, as you know we should and must.
Can guide the lost.